Coming to you from UBN Studios in Burbank, California. You are listening to the Unsugarcoated podcast with your host, Aalia.
Hello to everybody out there. I am so happy to be your host, Aalia. Today, we are going to be talking about redefining impossible. And you know, we are some resilient beings. And one of my goals in sharing these stories with the audience is to remind you of your own capabilities, your own strength and courage. I've said it before, I've been most inspired by others. And I consider myself quite fortunate to be able to bring something amazing to you that will hopefully spark within yourself something that when that little dark voice comes in and starts telling you what you can't do, I want the other voice to kick in loud, obnoxiously saying, yes, you can. And I want to share this story with you because it just relates to kind of what we're going to be talking about. I was once at an oncology appointment some years ago. This was around 2009, and I was sitting in the waiting room, and I picked up this magazine and read a woman's story that she had shared. It was a powerful story for me to hear at that moment in my own personal journey. And, I was sitting there waiting in the infusion center for my own name to be called. But in this piece, this woman shared her confession about a day she had had. And she was in the midst of her battle with cancer. Her 2 young sons were outside playing, and this was not a good day for her. And for anybody who's gone through health challenges, you know what I mean when you say you have a good day and you have bad days. So there she was, standing in her bathroom, looking at a medicine cabinet full of medicines. And she said to herself, I could just end this all right now. I don't know if I have the strength. And I get a little bit emotional when I talk about this because it's still a very hard-hitting story for myself. She said, I could just end this. I don't know if I have the courage to keep going. And right when she was in the middle of this internal battle, one of her young sons comes running into the bathroom, and he's very excited. And he has his hand closed, and he opens up and he says, Mommy, look at this spider I have found. And his leg is torn off, but he keeps going. He keeps fighting. Just like you, Mom. As a mother that day, I was very, very empowered. And I left that infusion center not feeling well in my own fight, but I refused to give up because of her story. And through the years, I've kept that story very close to me, and I've shared it often to hopefully inspire others. Now, I have to tell you that flash forward, to 2017, and I had my 4th daughter. And I was singing to her a childhood rhyme that I'd sang to my children, my other 3 kids often, but I guess it'd been a while since I'd sang it. And I don't know what it was, but on that day, this all came together for me. The Itsy Bitsy spider climbed up the water spout. Down came the rain and washed the spider out. But out came the sun that dried up all the rain. And the itsy bitsy spider, he went back up that spout again. All my ups and all my downs in life, divorce, cancer, autoimmune diseases, abuse, loss, abandonment, the list goes on. Those are rainy days. But like that spider, I relate because I know I kept climbing. I wouldn't give up. And I suddenly appreciated this child's rhyme without realizing that all along it was speaking to the resilient nature of us all. And if the spider doesn't give up, then why the hell should I? And while many of us get dumped on over and over again, there are those of us that get back up. And what we know what it is to experience the top of that spout. And I love the quote, it is not until you've been to the deepest of the darkest valleys that you can know how glorious it feels to stand at that mountaintop. And I have to tell you that it's because of that we look and we live, and that gives us the success, the hope, and moments that make life worth living for. And my husband has said to me a couple times, that's going to be difficult, to which I'm always answering, but not impossible. So with that, I'm so excited to share this conversation with you today. I hope that you really accept it because there is not too many people that I know who can really talk about redefining impossible like this man right here. So with that, let's get started. Swarner is a philanthropist, an author, and keynote speaker. He is a two-time terminal cancer survivor with one functioning lung who has dedicated his life to inspiring hope and helping others reach their full potential. Sean created Cancer Climber with his brother in 2001, a nonprofit organization that pays for and travels with cancer survivors to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. Sean's passion for climbing and adventure blossomed after becoming the first cancer survivor to summit Mount Everest. Since then, he has climbed all 7 summits and has skied to both North and South Poles, making him the first cancer survivor to complete the Explorer's Grand Slam. He accomplished all of this and has completed the Hawaii Ironman, all while having only one functioning lung. His adventures and passions have captured the attention of millions, and in 2017, a team followed Sean to the North Pole, capturing what has subsequently become the powerful documentary currently available on Amazon Prime, True North, the Sean Swarner story. In 2018, Sean was voted one of the top 8 most inspirational people in history and was the recipient of the Don't Ever Give Up Award presented by the Jimmy Fee Foundation and ESPN. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Sean Swarner. What's up, my friend?
More than anything right now, I think I just want to reach through this computer and give you a hug after that intro and everything that you just told us before introducing me.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, first of all, I'm so happy to have you. Where are you talking to us from today?
I am actually in my office in Colorado, where you can see, as you mentioned, I climb the highest mountain on every continent. I always bring stuff back with me. So there's a didgeridoo from Australia, and you really need to work on that circular breathing thing. It's difficult to do. But then I take a group up Kilimanjaro every year as a fundraiser for a cancer charity. And these are some spears from the Maasai, and here are 2 masks that I got over in Tanzania, Africa as well. So I'm in Colorado, to answer your question in a long-winded way. Colorado, back at home.
Surrounded by things that, you've just these incredible accomplishments. And I know on top of that, when I speak of accomplishments, not only what you've done physically, but what you've done emotionally for cancer patients throughout the world by giving them an ounce of what you go through and what you've gone through, which is I'm just going to be candid, everyone. You and I could sit down and have a 2-hour segment, but we got to pack it all in 50 minutes. And it's so incredible because, I'm still wiping tears away because part of my intro speaks to me, but also I know what we're about to talk, about. And so it always definitely, it strikes a chord with me. You have an incredible story. You were first diagnosed at age 13 with Hodgkin's disease and later with Askin sarcoma. You were given just 14 days to live, and currently you're the only person in the world to have ever been diagnosed with both of these deadly cancers. In fact, you have said that you would have more likely been able to win the lottery 4 or 5 times with the same numbers than to have survived both these terminal cancers, yet here you are. Today, as you've said, and as I've, a walking miracle, clearly, how do these 2 events, and I want to start with that, your childhood, how do you feel these 2 events shaped you then, and how does it feel to look back knowing how far you've come from those moments?
Well, first of all, I want to go back to what you said about the whole winning the lottery 4 times in a row thing. I've just never been very good with numbers, so maybe that's the reason why I'm still alive. And I just don't listen to the numbers.
It's good.
As you said, 13 the first cancer, 16 the second cancer, and I think I've grown up looking at life a little bit differently than most people. For example, looking at stories. I remember when I was 13, I was bald from head to toe, 60 pounds overweight, on my hands and knees in the shower, weeping, just absolutely in tears, pulling chunks of hair out of the drain so the water could go down. And I also remember in that same moment, I was thinking, what are my friends doing? Getting ready for school the same time, same day. I'm thinking, okay, well, Jerry, 2 houses across the street, 2 houses down. What's he doing? A normal guy. What's he doing getting ready for school? He's probably worried about the latest hairstyles, the nicest shoes. I think back then it was the Reebok pump. If you remember the Reebok pump, he was probably going, 25, 26, 27. Got it. Perfect. So I'm sitting here literally fighting for my life and I didn't care about being popular. I didn't care about the latest hairstyles. I'm glad I have hair, and I apologize I'm wearing a hat, but it's the whole COVID thing. It's just a mess, and I don't care. I don't care about the nicest clothes, the nicest, like I said, the hairstyles. I'm just happy to be alive. I've gone through the turmoil, and there were nights I went to bed not even knowing if I was going to wake up the next morning or not. So I kind of see life a little bit differently than most people. And as opposed to looking at all the things this might be it, as opposed to looking at all the things I don't have, I look at all the things I'm fortunate to have. As opposed to focusing on what I can't do, I always focus on what I'm able to do.
Yeah, that's a good place to start for sure. I relate to that. I want to ask you in more than one way, and I love it when you say it. Okay. So you went through this and not trying to skip over it in any way, shape, or form, but you came to this point. About how old were you when you started climbing? Where did that come in? I mean, I know you were always super athletic, right? You were always very athletic. I've seen the video on your mom talking about you swimming, and you guys, the Swarner brothers would show up, excuse me, and like everyone would be, oh, well, here we go. So naturally competitive. Where did climbing come into that?
Climbing didn't come in until way after the fact. So I went to school, born and raised small town, went to college. I turned into Belushi from Animal House. I had a wonderful time. I relived my high school years. I was the guy who was drinking too much, swinging from the rafters, partying like it was my job. So I look back at that and I thank mom and dad for about $100,000 party for 4.5 years of school. Going to grad school, let's say I was 22, 23 years old, in Florida, and that's when I came up with this idea of climbing. So it didn't even become a blip on the radar until much later. So I was in remission, let's say 17 years old. I didn't climb Everest until 27.
Oh wow.
So I moved from, well, like I said, I was living in Jacksonville, and I don't know too many people who climb mountains from Florida. So I moved to Colorado and started training on becoming the first survivor to do what I wanted to do. And it was quite a while after the fact, to be honest.
Okay, so yeah, which he says it so modestly, ladies and gentlemen, what he did. I mean, most of us cannot relate, and just starting with the Mount Everest and the other summits, it's like, I guess the all of them are the highest points on these continents. It's like I'll ask you more, but I mean, let's go back to that because, in my opening, I said it is one of my favorite quotes. And every time I hear it, I'm like, oh yeah. I mean, I even have it on a shot glass. Like there's a shot glass in my house with that quote. It's not until you've been to the deepest valleys. So you've stood on a summit so high, I cannot even imagine. Okay. But I would imagine that there were certain emotions. I would imagine there were times when you didn't know, if you could do it. I mean, I've seen, and everyone's got to go check out. Even the True North is amazing because it really kind of documents the real shit you go through. And I'm allowed to curse on this. I don't know why I don't. The real shit you go through. Freaking, how did it feel to get to that top? What did that moment feel like for you?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't even know if I could describe it, to be honest with you. It was the first mountain I ever climbed, the first big mountain I ever climbed. People told me it was physiologically impossible for someone with half their lung capacity to climb into an altitude where jumbo jets level off and fly. To give you an idea of how high Everest is, next time you hop in a pressurized tin can with wings and you're shooting through the stratosphere at 29,000 feet, look out the window and up 35 more feet. That's how high Everest is.
Wow.
So climbing up to that altitude, it meant a lot for me, but I had a higher purpose. And the entire time I was climbing, I had a flag. It was about this big that had names of people touched by cancer. And I had it in my chest pocket as a constant reminder of my goals. I wanted to use Everest as the highest platform in the world to scream hope and give back to the cancer community. So when I got there, the first thing that went through my mind was, oh, holy crap, I made it. I collapsed to my knees. I put my head in my hands, and I wept. I was so happy. I was so excited. I was so scared. But then an instant, like a millisecond later, I was thinking to myself, I got to go back down. Climbing is a round trip sport.
It's funny that you say that, okay, because I've not done much mountain climbing in my life. I've done hiking, and I really more picked that up in 2014 was when I started. Runyon Canyon, 2 stories I have to tell you. They're funny because you'll appreciate them. First time was one of my girlfriends said, hey, let's go rock climbing, like with an actual, I'm doing rock climbing, and rappel down. I'd never done it before in my life. And I was an adventure girl as a kid. I grew up in like Lake Tahoe. My grandfather was very wild, outdoorsy, but outdoorsy is different from like climbing and mountain climbing. I didn't do that. I climbed trees and fences. So I'm like, sure, I'm all about like, saying yes to everything in my life. I had just come out of my new remission, and I'm like, so I get it. I was like, sure. She's like, let's go mountain climbing. I'm like, sure. So we're in Malibu. I climb up this rock, Sean. I get up to the top, and I get in this little alcove, and I look out, and I'm like, holy crap, I made it up here. But then I was like, okay, I don't know how you guys are getting me down. Can somebody please call my mommy, because I really don't know how. And they're like, just lean out. And I'm like, no. And clearly I'm here. I made it out. I didn't have to call the police or anything, or the fire department, but I would just remember the fear. But at the same token, yes, there was this sense of accomplishment, like, oh my goodness, I actually made it up here. And I think far too many people underestimate their capability. And that's why I love that you say that. And I always tell people, don't look back unless it's to see how far you've come. And so for you, I can only imagine. And then you said, well, let me go do it 6 more times, and then the North Pole and South Pole. And in the documentary, I love how you're like pulling your Jeep. By the way, the training is no joke. It's like Creed. I felt like I was watching Creed, tires behind you and stuff. I'm like, I'm watching Creed in real life. This is crazy. Which, okay, there's something that I have to say, because I picked up on a bunch of the quotes that you say, and I love them. They speak to me. I relate, but I want to hear. And then I also, kind of will ask a little bit more, because again, this is about redefining impossible. So you've already shown yourself and the world, people that said with one lung, it's impossible for you to do these things, right? But it wasn't. And you proved them wrong. You have a statement that says, I'm cured of cancer, but I'm not done fighting. And let's talk about that, because one, I'm aware that you recently had received some news. And then secondly, and so, more importantly, like, how are you now, and how does that still continue in your life or change? Because I know what that statement means, but I'm wondering how it hits you now.
I think, well, I know you're definitely, I don't think you're referring to something, but I know you're referring to, recently I have been diagnosed with the type of skin cancer they think is a long-term side effect from my radiation therapy. And initially when it hit me, I was actually in an RV driving across the country to go visit my 98 grandma in Tampa. And that was in October. And I remember getting the phone call, and I was in the middle of nowhere. It was my wife and I think we were in the middle of, I want to say Missouri or something like that. And I'm on the phone with the dermatologist, and she says, I'm sorry, it's skin cancer, and we're going to have to do some surgery or this to take care of it. And all of a sudden, I lost signal. I was just like, wait, what? It's like, hello?
What the hell?
No. It's like, what the hell? So I broke down. I started crying again. I can see a trend here in my stories. I was on the shower floor crying. I was on the top of Everest crying, and now I'm in an RV crying. I sound like a big baby, but it brought back so many different memories of everything I went through, almost like PTSD. And it is very curable. They're going to go in there, just make an incision and remove it. They don't know how deep it goes, and they won't know until they get in there. Surgery scheduled for January 25th. But it brought back a lot of memories, and it wasn't anything that I cared to remember.
Right.
But I think I've been through enough now where I am going to put on that strong face, my game face. I'm going to continue pushing forward. And I actually spoke to the surgeon, and I got permission to actually document it. So we're going to record the surgery if anyone's interested in just seeing how it's done.
Right.
Maybe utilize what I'm going through to be an educational source for others. Maybe they're diagnosed with something, and they're thinking myself, oh my God, this is the end of the world. And they can just go and click and say, hey, look, this isn't so bad. And I think, being unstoppable, like you mentioned before, whether you think you can or you can't, you're absolutely right. And any limitation is a limitation you put on yourself that you allow to put on yourself. And I think people need to understand that. You're right. It was impossible to climb Everest with one lung. But if you have the right reasons and the right purpose behind it, and you know what your core values are, you're only going to stop yourself, and you will always be able to push further. Going through what you've been through too, and anybody who's gone through cancer realizes you don't know how strong you are. You don't realize how strong you are until you're in that situation. You don't understand how much you can truly handle until you're in that situation, because people always say, oh my God, look how much you've done, look how much you've been through. I could never do that. I guarantee you could.
Exactly. And it's interesting. Two things I'll go back and ask you about two things. One is because I remember watching one of your just talks about the patience. Actually, I think a lot of people assume it's not that the journey's not going to be difficult, but sometimes it does take longer than we want to, or it requires more action. So, for example, when you were going up Mount Everest, I was amazed to learn how many times you actually had to go back and forth, back and forth. You went up to base camp and down, and then back up, because you had to condition your lungs to these atmosphere. And then even still, when you got up there, I remember you saying you thought you were dying because like your body was literally rejecting being up there. And I think that the second part, before I ask you more to talk on that, like my father-in-law was just recently diagnosed with a type of cancer, and for my husband's family, they're yes, they've seen cancer, but this is the first time. And it's very interesting how my response is different. I think as cancer survivors, our response is a little bit different when we hear, oh, I have cancer, because whereas a lot of people typically go to a very dark place, this is it, we're like, well, there's a lot of more modern technology and major advancements in cancer treatment. I myself had immunotherapy, so it's like I know the benefits, I've seen it. So we're trying to offer hope instead of people going to that dark place like you talk about. But speak more a little bit to the patience that you had. Like, how hard was it to go back and forth and go through that process, and then know it was so close, but yet you still had to take the necessary steps in order to get there, as we would say, quote unquote, successfully?
Absolutely. I think if you begin any journey, or when you begin any journey, and you know the end result, but you know why you're doing it, anything that gets in your way is just going to act as a speed bump. It's not going to be a big enough mountain to stop you and make you turn around. It might be enough to slow you down, but if you have a higher purpose for doing what you're doing, you're never going to quit. A perfect example is, on Everest, like you mentioned, it takes a lot longer than most people think. It took me a month and a half to climb Everest, from base camp to the top. And it wasn't because it's that big and you start down here and you slowly go up the mountain. It's because you go up and you establish 4 different camps along the way. And what you're doing is you're actually allowing your body to get used to the altitude. So in extreme altitude like Everest and other mountains around the world, your body actually manufactures more red blood cells and hemoglobin to be more efficient. Because if we left right now from where we both are, I'm probably standing, like I said, at home at about 6,200 feet. I don't know where you are, but I'm guessing it's probably not 6,000 feet. It's probably like maybe 1,000 tops. But if we went from here to the top of Everest, we would be dead in a matter of minutes, because our bodies wouldn't have enough oxygen. Our brains would be starved from oxygen. We would pass out and we would die. So taking time is what you're doing there. When you're taking that time, is your body's manufacturing those red blood cells and hemoglobin to be more efficient, so you can actually utilize the little oxygen to be moving around your body faster, or more efficient. So while I'm on the mountain, I'm on a glacier, like I said, for a month and a half, and every day that glacier is moving 4 feet a day. So like I said, a month and a half. If you add that up, that's a tremendous amount of difference. Every morning I woke up, I thought to myself, looking up at the mountain, my God, I'm 4 feet further away than what it was yesterday. Obviously it doesn't really mean that much. Oh, it's only 4 feet. But if you add that up over a month and a half, that's a tremendous difference.
Right.
However, having patience, knowing that it's going to happen at some point, and I have a reason and a purpose behind it, that's what keeps you going.
Yeah. How many times did you see people give up before they probably should have? I'm always reminded of the little imagery out there. It's of a guy in a diamond mine, and he's so close. He's right there, but then he gives up too soon. And it's kind of telling people, just, you could be right there on the cusp of everything you want, and then you give up too soon. How many times did you see people give up, perhaps in your opinion, when you thought, if you could keep going, but you're choosing to? And that's okay too, by the way. I'm one of those people. Hey, what's right for each individual? But what do you think about that? Have you seen that? Have you experienced that? What have you thought? What do you think?
Great question. And I could go both ways on that, because you're almost there. You can continue pushing a little bit further, because that giant diamond is that far away. At the same time, I've seen people push and not come home,
Right.
because
Right.
climbing mountains is a little bit different than going for, say, well, because I did the Hawaii Ironman. If I didn't train hard enough for the Hawaiian Ironman, I just might not finish in the time that I wanted to finish in.
Right.
If I don't train hard enough, and I didn't train hard enough for Everest in the mountains, I might not come home.
Yeah.
So they're a little bit different, and there's that balance of what I really want to do, pushing myself past what I think I should be doing, and kind of reeling myself in at the same time. It's as you said before, taking calculated risks and knowing where your comfort zone is, and pushing just slightly past that, because past that might be a cliff and you might die. But I've seen a number of people push beyond that and make it, and a number of people push beyond that and actually pass away. On Denali, for example, the highest mountain in North America, two people I knew were at the last camp. No one went. We were like, okay, you know what? The weather's going to get bad. There's high avalanches. They took off in the middle of the night, never came home.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's incredible. I can only imagine, but it does bring me back to another statement which you've said, and I love it so much. And before I actually have you talk on it, I have to give you my perspective. As a part of the cancer community, I've been privy to having watched a battle, our own and our friends. And sometimes towards the end, or like they end up in the hospital, and then everyone starts praying, please, prayers for the miracle that they come out of this, prayers for the miracle, which is fine. Don't get me wrong. Like, again, but one of the things that started to strike me after, unfortunately, whether it was many times that I saw this, or unfortunately, whether I saw many of my friends pass, I started to realize something. I started to want to kind of tell those people, just in case you didn't know, we've been living the miracle. Every moment that we get to say hello and goodbye, every moment that we get to have a hug, every moment that we get to have a kiss is actually the miracle already happening to us. And while I don't definitely know what they're speaking to when someone's in a hospital and whatnot, I know you've said you're looking at a walking miracle. How do you take everything that you've gone through and then go and tell the next, what I don't mean to say like the next generation, but the next cancer survivors, fighters, warriors that you meet? How do you transition that same energy to get them to realize they themselves are also a walking miracle?
That's a great question, and I completely agree with you. Every day is a miracle. As I mentioned before, there were nights I went to bed not even knowing if I was going to wake up the next morning. So every breath I take, you're right, I'm a living, breathing, walking miracle. And when I wake up in the morning, I'm super happy. I don't turn in. I don't turn on the news, and I'm thinking out loud right now. I don't turn on the news. I don't get on social media. So maybe for the next generation, maybe for anybody else, what you do every morning it becomes a pattern, and that pattern becomes who you are. So if you wake up in the morning and you start to consume this negativity, because on the news, on social media, it's what, 99% negative, and if you're just ingesting that, there's that saying that you are what you eat. But in all honesty, I think you are what you consume.
Right.
So
right.
If you're constantly consuming negativity, what do you think is going to happen to you? What do you think is going to happen to your attitude? How motivated do you think you're going to be?
Yeah.
So slowly start paying attention to those little things that might be pulling you down, or those little things that are keeping you here. And you want to move up here, using the mountain as an analogy, you want to get to the top of the mountain. You want to get to the top of your peak.
Right.
If you want to be someone different, if you want something different, do something different.
Yes.
To start developing different patterns. So if people are looking for some words of advice, look in the mirror and see be more mindful and see what you can do differently, because what I do might not work for you. But if you know what your personal core values are, what means most to you, start making decisions based on that, because then you'll look back at life and you'll never have any regrets, because we are where we are right now based on all the decisions we've made in our past.
Yes.
If you want to be in a different place in the future, start making better decisions.
Yeah, which leads to another thing. You've said consistency is more important than intensity. So expand on that, because I feel like that's another just true nugget on life. Life hack 101.
Well, let me ask you a question. How does someone get giant muscles from working out? Do they go to the gym once a week and train for 5 hours a day, 5 hours that day? No, they go for 5 days and train for an hour each day.
Right.
It's that consistency thing. You know, if someone's going to run a marathon, you're not going to go and decide, oh, tomorrow I'm going to go and run 15 miles. You build up to that.
Right.
So you have to be consistent in doing what you're doing, and you have to turn that consistency into positive habits. And that's where I think people need to start making more mindful decisions based around what they want. So like I said before, if you want to be here, you're not here for a reason. You know, you're back here, let's say, and I'm just using those as like an analogy because it's almost like a life journey. You know, if you want to be here and you're here, there's a reason you're not here. Or
Right.
you want this and you have that. So to go from here to there, you have to change what you're doing. Otherwise, you'd already be here.
Mm-hmm.
So start paying attention to all those little decisions that you're making in your life to get you where you are, and not just one decision. You know, pay attention to all those little decisions that are going to get you there. Because like you said, yeah, consistency is more important than intensity. You can't just push and push and push for one day and give up. You know, the millionaires and the billionaires around the world, do you think that was just dumb luck? You think they put in the effort for one day and quit? No.
Right.
It becomes who they are.
Right. Right. And you also, and not everyone has to go actually climb Mount Everest, but we do all have, Mount Everests in our lives. I
Absolutely.
feel, you know, we all have. I know for me personally, like when I started over, I had, you know, in 2014, when I went through my divorce, I found myself starting over. And the reason why I was not, once again, you know, in my point B was because of the changes that had happened. But I knew that I could get there again, or I knew that I wasn't going to give up. And like you say, those consistency, it mattered. And it's funny how even in my own mind, I know if I'm doing something that I say, okay, well, I've gained a few COVID pounds. Well, it's never going to come off if I just sit on the couch and think about how I should just got on the stair climber for 30 minutes, you know, or go walk for 30 minutes. If I don't make that action, it won't happen. So I totally agree. What actually leads me to, it causes me to think about how you've said something, and I get it, like our fight. Oh, you talked about this, and I remember I was telling my husband, I've talked about that, and it's been in podcasts, I've been on from as an author, people have asked me, but you hit on it where I used to do this thing, Sean. So when I was sick, and I would go to the gym and actually work out for health and building. And I believed in like how I treated my body was going to help me fight cancer as much as I could. And I remember being on ellipticals, and I would just in my head picture, it was like a cartoon, right? Now in my mind, I'm speaking to my body, and I have formulated images of like my healthy cells, and there's the cancer cells. And I would imagine the healthy cells beating the crap out of the cancer cells. I'm like, get them, man, just get them. And that's what I would do while I was on the treadmill, like, or on the elliptical or whatnot. You talk about that, and you've talked about how really your battle is often in your mind, and cancer couldn't touch that. Talk about the mental endurance that goes into really like redefining that impossible, because it's not easy, right? And were there times when you were like, man, I should just pack up and go home? Maybe this isn't for me today.
Absolutely. I love that analogy, because I haven't told many people this, but there was a moment when I was going through the second cancer. That's when I was told I had 14 days to live. There was a time I remember laying in my bed, and there's a bright flash of light, and I remember like hovering over my body. And it still gives me the creeps, and it makes me emotional thinking about it and talking about it too. But I remember looking at my body and kind of floating back this way. And all of a sudden, I just kept thinking to myself, but that can't be it. And then I felt a hand right in the middle of my back just push me in. And all of a sudden, I sat up in bed. And I really think that I had an out-of-body experience. I think I died, to be honest with you.
It's incredible, though. I think because of the way that I've understand, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I want you to finish talking about like, what did that, but I mean, I only have to echo, I feel that there's validity in that because of the way that we experience and go into our bodies and the way that, especially when we're dealing with certain issues, we do seek to look deeper. We look to go in ourselves more. And I think that just doing that gives you experiences that maybe other people haven't been able to, experience themselves. So when you came back from that, like, what did it do? How did it make you feel? Did it make you, that day?
Well, I continued doing what I did when I was battling the first cancer. And I don't know, going back to the whole visualization thing, I don't know if you've ever heard of Calvin and Hobbes or not.
Yes.
Okay. So in the comic strip, I think I have all of his Bill Watterson's comics. But there's his alter ego, I suppose, was Spaceman Spiff. And I pretended like I was in a microscopic spaceship. And I remember laying in the hospital bed and the IV dripping down. And I remember being in a drip of the IV coming down. And I visualized myself in that tube. And I could remember seeing my body laying in the hospital bed on my left, the television up there, my mom or my dad laying on the chair to my right, the door out to the hallway to my left, and the windows out of the hospital. And all of a sudden, I remember being like thrust into my body, and all of a sudden, everything got dark, and there were millions of these little tiny spaceships, and we all collected in the heart, which was kind of like the Grand Central Station, I suppose. And I remember seeing from inside my body, I remember seeing the valves of my heart kind of coming in and out, in and out, in and out, lub-dub, basically. And all of a sudden, it was my turn, and I just got shot out of the body, or shot out of the heart. And I remember looking at the GPS, there was like a little arrow, and I was turning left, right, depending on where I was supposed to go in the arteries and the veins. And all of a sudden, I would just sneak up on the cancer, and I would unload these missiles and laser beams and everything else that were laden with chemotherapy. So I was killing it from the inside out, kind of like what you're doing on the treadmill. But I did this when I was in the hospital bed, and I was laying there. I had this epic Star Wars invasion in my body, almost like a video game. Kind of.
Right.
And I really think it helped.
Yeah.
And I think if I'm a huge believer in the mind-body connection. And I tell people when I take them up Kilimanjaro all the time, you have to picture yourself up there. But it's not just, like a dream where you're looking down at the top of the mountain and you're seeing yourself move up to the summit. It's that you have to be there first person, and you have to utilize other senses, because I did it with Everest as well. So when every night I went to bed before I even thought about, flying over to Kathmandu, to Nepal to start. Every night I went to bed, I visualized myself on the top. I could smell the ozone. I could hear the styrofoam crunching of the snow under my feet. I could feel the wind whipping by. I could hear it whipping by. And what you do then is you use first-person visualization, and then you incorporate your other senses. But the main component that most people don't do is they don't make it, there's no emotional attachment to it. Mm-hmm. So how does it feel when you get that goal? How does it feel when you're a survivor? Not just, oh yeah, it feels great. No, how does it feel really? Like, how does it move you at the core level? I think that's the main component most people miss.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's very interesting when you hear people talk about that. I remember when I was younger, this is so silly. It's a very silly kind of comparison, but it's not, because it does speak to that visualization. I remember wanting a stick shift when I was younger. I remember wanting stick shift so bad. And I would just, in my mind, I would see myself driving a car. I'm in it. I'm shifting. And when I finally got my stick shift car, it's like I felt like, oh, I'm actually living what I envisioned. Little did I know these were sneak peeks into that mentality. And, I was going to ask you how much. Oh, so the other thing, and I have to say, so this morning, taking a shower, getting ready for today, and knowing that I'm going to come speak to you, right? And I was doing this test because I also had the theory, and I'm going to ask this because let's just ask, what are some of the temperatures that you have dealt with? Like, I mean, Seriously, I read the part, or I mean, heard you talk about how in this documentary where if you stopped, the sweat could actually kill you because you sweat because you're working, but then the air is so cold. If you stop, that perspiration can then become ice and like freeze you from inside. So that's incredible. So just out of curiosity, what's the coldest temperature you've been through or been in? And go ahead. Yeah, answer that first.
No, I was going to say, I know exactly what you're talking about. There was a quote that I had in the movie, and it said, if you sweat, you die. It's that simple. Because if you sweat, it gets under clothes, and then when you stop, you don't have that body heat, the wind comes by, and it was 80 to maybe 90 below zero.
Oh, gosh.
Instantly frozen. Any exposed skin in, I would say, 30 seconds would be gone.
Wow. And so see, this morning I was like, you know, because a lot of times people, when they think about impossible, again, going back to that patience and the training that you have to go through and the preparation. So I was in the shower and I like a little bit of colder water. I think it's good for my skin, my hair, but you know, my husband's like, he doesn't like it cold at all. It's super hot. So I'm in there and I'm like, let me keep turning it down, because a lot of times people just go from, well, you know, you go from hot to cold and then you're like, oh my gosh. But what I did is I kind of did this test. I just want to hear. So I kept lowering it and I'd let my body adjust to it. And then I'd lower it a little bit more, and then I'd adjust my body, and, you know, and I'd put my, you know, get my hair and stuff, and it'd wash over me, and I'd get a little bit of like, whew, but I could tolerate it, right? And I thought, I want to talk to this little thing that I was doing was kind of experimental, but of like, in your process of preparing for such cold weather, and like, you know, I know you're up in Colorado and stuff, but I remember you were in Florida, so that's not the coldest place in the world. You know, when you know, again, speaking to that, like, it's incremental, right? It's the little things that make the biggest difference if you can just be patient, I feel. What do you think about that? And how does that kind of relate to what you go through in your training and efforts?
You mean with the cold?
I mean, with the cold, and as well of like just the process. It doesn't like you didn't make this plan to climb Mount Everest, like you said, and it's all of a sudden done very quickly. Certain things, sometimes the best things, it's done in little increments. Your body adjusts, you get move closer, you're able to tolerate a little bit more and so forth. You know what I mean? Like just the ideology of it. Like, do you relate to that? And does that make sense in any of the stuff that you've done?
It does. And going back to what you mentioned about me pulling the Jeep for training, you know, I didn't just strap up the Jeep onto my harness and start pulling it down the driveway or pulling it down the road. I started with one tire. Right. You know, obviously not my tire off my Jeep. I went to like a I don't know, like Big O Tires or something like that. It was kind of a funny story. I walked in there, I was like, hey, what do you guys do with the old tires? The guy was like, what? I was like, we recycle them. Why? I was like, well, can I have some? He's like, what are you going to do with them? Like, I'm going to drill a hole in them and tie them together and drag them around my neighborhood. He looked at me like I had 4 heads or something. But started that way. And I started with, you know, dragging one tire around the neighborhood, then 2 tires, then 3 tires, then 4 tires. And then I ended up pulling my Jeep around the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. So incrementally building yourself up. Again, you know, if you're going to run the New York City Marathon, you're not going to go out and run 13 miles the first day. You start off doing a little bit, and then you start doing that, you know, it starts going up. You know, and that would be like the compound effect, doing a little bit here and a little bit more, and then eventually working up to whatever it might be. Yeah. So
that's a good book, by the way. The Compound Effect. Have you ever read that? Yes. I didn't know if that's what you're referring to.
Absolutely, yeah. And I've actually utilized it in my my online program, and there's a section where I talk about how the compound effect. If you're off by a little bit, let's just say I'm out in the middle of the woods and I'm in the forest on top of a peak, and I'm trying to make my way back to the car, which is on the road, and it's 20 miles away. If I'm going this way and I'm following a compass, if I'm off by 10 degrees, by the time I get to the car, this is 20 miles, I've gone way more than 20 miles over here, and I still have 5 miles to go back to the car. Right. So people need to start paying attention to those little changes.
Yes. Yeah. No, absolutely. I love that. I think people, you know, I would encourage anyone who's listening to go learn more about you and check out some of the things that you do. A couple quick questions. What's next for you right now? I mean, what are you doing now? I mean, I know you just mentioned the, you know, potential doc that you're working on the side, documenting that, but what else? I mean, what's the next quote unquote Mount Everest for Sean Swarner?
Well, two big things. Actually, 3 big things. I recently got married. I've heard that's more difficult than climbing Everest sometimes. So So that's an adventure in itself, I've heard.
Agreed.
So I recently got married.
I refer to my marriage as an adventure, by the way. And it's complicated. It's always no, but I mean, I love it. It's a good complicated, but always exactly. So by the way, congratulations on that too. So
thank you very much. Yeah, see right there.
Yeah.
So got married recently. I've put together an online program. I think I mentioned it. It's called the Summit Challenge, thesummitchallenge.com. But the next big adventure, I want to run 7 marathons on 7 continents in 7 days.
Wow. You talk about overachievers. Dear goodness. And, I mean, since you mentioned your lovely wife, how does she feel about you going? I mean, she has to obviously love it and support it and all of that. I can tell. But I mean, like, does she ever pull you inside and say, really, when will it be enough? I mean, I'm just saying, because there's women out there who probably be like, I want my husband at home, not climbing mountains. But she's clearly wonderful. She's letting you do your thing.
She is fantastic. She also knew what she was getting into. So it's not like, hey, I need to change this guy. So I don't want you to climb mountains anymore. But I met her in Puerto Rico, and she's from Puerto Rico. Her family's still down there, so we get down there quite often. And in all honesty, I love her family. I love everyone who's involved with her family, and I actually love Puerto Rico too. We were down there for both hurricanes, and we did a lot of we sent a lot of resources down to help out after the hurricanes just destroyed the island. But it's a beautiful place if you've never made it there.
Yeah, I do remember you being there. I remember you getting aid. You were on boots on the ground helping people during, a very difficult time, and talked about that. I do remember that quite clearly. So right now you do all these wonderful things, and I would really just love, like, what is your kind of call to action to society right now? Again, we want to always, we encourage people, live their best life. Don't underestimate your potential. But, from you, what is your call to action in society right now? We're obviously we haven't touched on it to just, but like, I think so many people are tired of hearing about COVID. So right. But like, honestly, we both know life goes on, right? We know nothing other than to get up each day and put that next foot in front of the other. What's your call to society right now?
That's a great question. And as we're talking, I was thinking, there are probably a 1,000 things I could talk about, but the biggest one would probably be knowing that no matter what happens to us, we always have a choice in how we want to react. So going back, like you said, to COVID, unfortunately, it's here. It's been around for a while. COVID didn't cause the toilet paper to fly off the shelves. COVID didn't cause this. It didn't cause that. It's us. It's how we reacted to it. We always, in every situation, have a choice in how we want to react. Mm-hmm. And if people are paying attention to that, we can react differently. We can choose to react differently, because one of the greatest freedoms we have in life is the freedom of choice. And I think with how crazy the world seems right now, it's amazingly, it's you got people over here, you got people over here. People are blaming politics, people are blaming something else. Stop for a second and look in the freaking mirror and take responsibility for your own actions, your own thoughts, and where you are in your own place in life, and make decisions based on what you value most, and do what's best to help others. It's not difficult.
Yeah, agreed. That was so well said. So well said. I can't, you said it perfectly, and I agree with you. How can our audience support you? Where can they find you? I know for the audio audience, they don't get to see. So where's your, what handles do you use? Where can people get in touch with you? Not stalk you, but just keep in touch and support.
I was just going to say right there, SeanSwarner.com. I can see on the computer, but if you can't see it, the best way, just go to thesummitchallenge.com. That is the best place, because I'm really trying to push that out there. It's a series of 7 challenges based on your personal core values to help you not conquer your mountains, but to help conquer yourself.
Oh, I love that. That does not surprise me, one. And I think that, again, going back to the whole message and mission is, teaching people. And you don't have to climb a mountain, but you definitely, can still do some incredible things. And I think that I know personally, I know no other person I'd rather learn from climbing a summit than you. So thank you for all that you do. Thank you for being part of our, journey today. It's been amazing to have you, and I look forward to actually following up with you in the future too.
That sounds great. I appreciate it. Grateful to be here.
Thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon, okay?
Take care.
And everybody at home, thank you so much. This is actually going to wrap up another season of Unsugarcoated with Aalia. I hope if this is the first you've heard, that you'll go back and check out any episodes from all of our amazing just individuals and stories that we are here to share. They are always relevant, and I continue to appreciate your support as the audience, the support of my incredible superhero guests. We will continue to do this, and please stay connected with me by signing up on our website for an occasional newsletter, www.unsugarcoatedmedia.com. You can also stay connected with Unsugarcoated Media on TikTok, Pinterest, Instagram, and Facebook. And if you'd like to directly stay connected with me, then please connect with me on IG. That is Aalia, _Unsugarcoated. In the meantime, until the next time, please be reminded of how incredible you are. The greatness that is inside you is waiting to come out. And like a diamond, which goes through intense heat and an incredibly rough and harsh process to get its magnificent shine, you are not only a beautiful miracle, but you've managed to come out with a shine so bright that nobody can really even tell you've been burned. And so please, my friends, I know it's not easy, but stay strong. Let's stick together. And as always, I appreciate you letting us be unsugarcoated. Take care. See you next season. Here. Come back next week.